Hello there, my lovely sunwalkers. Welcome back to another episode of, listening to the voices in our heads with me, Jenna O'Malley, your soul writer. Today, we're joined by a dear poet friend of mine, Kaylah. She's from South Africa. She's also been a content writer, and she newly graduated during the pandemic from college in this wonderful field. So, let's go ahead and jump in and see what it's been like for her getting her poetry out there and going through her process. And as always, make sure you do everything you can to take care of yourselves a little bit better each day, my lovelies. You're totally worth it. In the meanwhile, let's rock it. Hello there, my lovelies. Welcome to another episode of Listening to the Voices in Our Heads. And I have another buddy author pal here of mine, Miss Kaylah. How are you doing today?
Hey, so I'm doing very good. Just a bit nervous. This is my second interview, like ever.
We're thrilled to have you. Where are you located?
I'm from South Africa, and I stay in a small town called Pietermaritzburg.
Where is that located? Like, if we were looking at a map, is it closer to the coastline? Is it further inland?
It's very close to the coast. So where I stay, it's kind of close to Durban. So we're an hour away from Durban, which is like the where the beaches are. It's our capital.
I thought that's what it, if I recalled my geography correctly. Is that the capital, or it's been a bit? Yes, peoples in the audience, I did study geography in college. It was required. So
Yes,
tell
yes.
us.
It's
Go ahead.
definitely one of the capitals. There's Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, Pietermaritzburg. They're our our states. Yeah.
Those of us here in the U.S. would have similar, like where I live in Maryland, the capital of the state of Maryland is Annapolis, named for one of the not so greatest queens of England. So tell us, my dear, about you as far as your author career goes. Are you indie? Are you traditional? Are you working in progress?
I feel like I'm an indie author. I self-published this year, so I'm very new to the author game, as you may call it. But before I became an author, I studied what you guys call a liberal arts degree, but we call it a Bachelor of Arts. So my degree was 3 years, and then I went on to do a postgraduate, which ended last year in English literature. And it was one of the most, it was fun but hardworking at the same time. And I guess that's where my dream of publishing actually stemmed from.
It sounds like you and I are kind of similar in that. I got my Bachelor of Science in English lit for before getting my master's in teaching secondary ed. So I understand exactly what you mean. An English major's life literally is reading and essays.
My thesis module was like the longest module of my life, and it was only one semester long. So I relate there. But it's a joy once you dedicate yourself to it. And at some point, I am going to go back and do my master's. It's been one of the things my family's been pressing me to do, but since COVID hit, it's something I said that, it needs to go on the back burner because it's going to ruin my chances of getting a job. Because it's either you're qualified or you're too qualified once you hit the MA. So you never know. There's no middle ground.
Yes, yes. Preach. Very much true. I know exactly what you're saying. That same wavelength, same thought process. That's been my life the last year, so I understand. So,
I'm
as
so
far,
glad we get each other.
hey, we writers tend to have more overlapping avenues of connection than we realize sometimes, honestly. So you said you're new to the indie scene. Is it self-publishing through a specific publishing? Like, are you Amazon? Are you Ingram Sparks? Are you through another company?
Well, right now I'm through Amazon and I'm looking at other possibilities. So, for example, I wanted to publish on Google Play and Kobo,
Same
but
here.
they have a bit of a issue right now with South Africa and it not being on the list to publish. So I'm gonna look for a bigger company like Smashwords or Draft to Digital, like that will distribute my books to those certain channels, because payment was also a problem with Kobo books, because that was one of the avenues I was recently looking to go into. And I've actually found someone that published their book through Google Play Books, which is one of our biggest retailers. People are not really Amazon fans in South Africa. I'm not really sure, but from what I know, they're mostly local. It's a weird culture, but
They have done well to open their certain markets, but not all. And I noticed they said they wanted to add a bunch more when I went in to update some things on my first book again. And I said, please just add every country. That would be absolutely lovely. Thank you very much. So
it would be lovely.
tell
Then
us
authors
about,
wouldn't,
I'm sorry, go ahead, hon.
sorry, authors wouldn't have to look for the bigger fish. They would just, I mean, it's a good and a bad thing, because authors can just solely say, hey, I'm going to focus on this distributor, especially if you're new to the game, because if the more you think about expanding, it's kind of overwhelming as a newbie and you don't really know what you're doing, but you just hope you get there.
Very much so, and agreed. I just put my first book out this past February 2021, and I'm, again, right in that boat of, do I want to go bigger? Because my second book just came out. I've got more coming. And for you, what's your first book then, my dear?
Firstly, congrats on the book.
Well, thank you.
And secondly, I write poetry. So, like you're saying, so many people keep on asking me, my family included, so when's your next book coming? And I'm like, well, I'm still trying to launch this one, just pump the brakes. I'm still trying to learn what works for this one before I release a brand new baby number two into this world.
That's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. So, let me just give you a bit more information about myself.
Go for it.
So, on top of self-editing and self-publishing, I self-edited, designed my own cover, and I formatted the book to Kindle specifications. So yeah, I did all of that myself, and I'm also designing my own social media promotionals, infographics. Um, on the side, I'm a content writer, and now and again, my father has a few extra freelance projects, editing theses and research projects. But that's how I'm keeping myself busy these days.
You definitely are living the writer's dream for sure. Congratulations on doing that. And Has your first book completely launched yet, or is it set to launch soon?
Oh no, it's launched. I'm still trying to find readers at the moment.
I understand. It took me a good 6 months before I started really getting solid routine hits. Does that make sense? Because of figuring out the
Yeah.
system and where to go and who to talk to. So, for you, are you, as far as organizing your poetry goes, these are terms we tend to more use when we're writing fiction or nonfiction. But are you like a plotter, a pantster, or a plantster? Do you organize or outline any of your poems in any way?
I'm more of a planster. I will not lie to you. The organizing process comes after I've written something. So in terms of planning, there's very little that goes into it besides researching themes and categorizing my poems just by name. And then when I have the time, which is usually when I decide that I'm gonna publish something, I have to sit and go through every single poem, put it in a category, and I have um, three at the moment, but I've only managed to put a few poems away because the organizational thing, it hits me now and again, and then sometimes it just feels like, well, um, another day. So it's still a learning curve for me, and that's my process. It's not exactly organized, but it is in a folder that says manuscripts. So
Right. You
there's that.
you tend to go more free form up front and then get your organization on the back end, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a very. I've not really written much that way myself. I've had a character try to change that for me. He's not winning. Um, so do you perform? You said you perform research for your poems. Like what kind of research? Because I know for me with my novels, it's sometimes looking up like historical dates, names, places. For you, what does that look like with poetry?
Well, for me, it's about because I'm very young. I turned 25 this year. So in terms of
You're a
having
baby.
English under my belt, I don't have that much. I mean, in my honors, I was one of those people that would use a lot of big words. But then I graduated and I was like, how can I use these big words in my writing and still make it make sense? So sometimes I just Google synonyms because I write, my first drafts are usually very simple. Not always do I get hit with boom, beautiful inspiration, poeticness. It takes a bit of practice for me. So I do search for better ways and better descriptive words. And sometimes it takes me looking at other people's work to just gain a spark of inspiration of what I'm trying to say. And then I just try and I think about it and I just try and make my own metaphor that goes in with what I'm trying to say, because you can't exactly take someone else's work and use that metaphor in your own work because it just feels wrong. But you also have to find something that works for you.
Right. And you don't want to steal anyone's work no more than you want to coming off sounding like cliche and reusing
Yeah,
something that's been said a million times either.
definitely. And that was one of the biggest challenges when I was writing my now published poetry book. I realized well, we're actually gonna get to that in, I think, question 7. There was
Yeah, we're
a
headed that
lot of
way.
things. There was a
If you
lot of
want, we
things
can go that
that
way now.
perfect. There was a lot of things that when I actually read my first draft, I was like, this is terrible. Like, I used to write like this. And there
And
was things that I had to just cut out, like cut out completely. I couldn't even revive it to like be poetic. It was just so cliche. And
yep.
I was just like, there's some things that are worth saving in terms of writing, and there's some things that just, when you read it, it doesn't align to your writing
Right.
vision
Right.
anymore. Because, the more you go on, the more you learn as a writer. Your writing style changes. Not always, but it'll shift. It'll become better. It'll get shaped the more you learn and go along. So there came points where I was just like, wow, so this is what I write like. Oh my goodness.
It's humbling, and sometimes you'll even have a moment of, did I write that? That's actually kind of good. um,
Yeah.
that's kind of the opposite that happened to me recently. My husband was rereading a scene from my book too, and he was it's the first time he has read my second book all the way through from cover to cover since it's been published. And there's two brother figures in the books, and they get along. They started snipping at each other, and one brother calls the second brother a prick, and
Oh
the
my
other
word.
one just starts the name calling. And I got really clever with the name calling and forgot about it. It was cliche, but it was funny cliche. So, to clue our lovelies here listening in, the question we skipped to was, of all the items left on the cutting room floor for deletion, which one do you miss the most and why? Is there a poem that got left out of this, or a line that got left out of this launch that you really wish you could have worked in somewhere else?
There was a specific poem that I reworked, and that there was a few that I cut out. I think one or two, but I can't really recall the names at the moment. So there's this one that I titled "The Land of the Lost," and I completely reworked it. It was such a depressing poem to begin with. I was just thinking, how can I make this better? I don't want people to read this and then feel like, oh my word, I'm so depressed, I want to slip my wrist. No, I don't want it to be like that. So I was like, some of the things I have to rework to make people see that there can be hope in dark, dark, dark things.
Right. That's kind of reminding me of a character of mine, Harumi. She has an issue that kind of makes me wonder, do people worry about me the same way? If you have worried about me because of writing about Harumi's issue in book 2, I'm okay, is what I've been telling people. Oh my goodness. So, what, as far as, is there a poem, therefore, that made it in that you wish didn't? Let's go the opposite end of that question, actually.
Oh,
Is there
you
one
hitting
you
me with the
like?
bombshell.
Like, is there a poem that your family said, this has to go in, and you're like, no, I don't want it to?
Actually, no. I had full creative license when it came to choosing what should be in and what shouldn't be in.
And that's
And
absolutely
in terms of,
wonderful.
yeah, I mean, no offense. I let my family read my work. I was a bit terrified, but I was like, okay, well, if you can't let your own family read your manuscripts, then the world shouldn't be seeing it. I mean, they got to be seeing this firsthand, so you know that you're ready to put it out there. And they surprisingly loved it. I feel like I was my biggest critic in that department in terms of what should stay in, what should go out, what should stay in, what should go out. And there was only one poem because I initially planned it to be about 30 pages. So there was one poem, I can't remember the name, that I was like, okay, well, this doesn't fit, scrapping you. And I chose something that I actually wrote very recently, and something I actually edited like very recently, like a couple months before I decided to work on my manuscript. And so I was going through my poems. That time I was still with my Hawaii. And so I had my poems on my phone, and it was in a nice folder that says poetry. So I went through, and then I saw
Oh
this
no.
poem called The
Don't tell
Bleeding
me.
Nights.
You
And
didn't
I
lose
was
it on
like,
your phone, did you?
no, I backed up everything to my Google Drive. And I also made sure that there was like a second hard copy on my PC. I was like, it
Gotcha.
it needs to be in two places. Like, I do not trust technology. And I moved everything over when I switched phones except my documents. I was sad about that. I was like, everything else but the most things that I have on my phone is all poetry. And Apple is not making my life easy at all. Anyway,
Oh.
I had to send it over, share it, and some things weren't sending, but thankfully it got done. And I decided to choose the poem The Bleeding Nights, and I included that in my manuscript just before the closing poem.
And do you wish you would have moved it elsewhere, not included it, or worked on it differently?
In terms of structure, every poem is different. It tells a different story. It's written very story like. So, in terms of placing it in a specific way, I didn't have that problem. I was just like, it's placed where it's placed. It'll get, it'll get read either way. Um, just because everything in the exposition, which is what my anthology is called, is what I intended it for it to be in there. So I was like, it doesn't. I did actually order it somehow. Um, my friend said, and a few other people that have read my manuscript, that I ordered it in a way that it goes from really dark and depressing and um, gloomy to light, hope, mystical, and inspiring. That was
And
not actually done on purpose, but it's it's somehow something I actually managed to. I didn't actually consciously do it, but it's something that crossed my mind when I was, like you're saying, I did move certain things to make sense and to structure it so that there's this eclipse from dark to light. So I did actually move some things around. Sorry, I'm just actually remembering that now to create that
it's
effect.
okay.
So when you leave the manuscript, when you put it down, it makes you feel lighter than when you picked it up.
I love the way you worded that. And it literally takes you on that journey. Such a good title for it then. So, just since you said it can be very inspiring, is there something that inspires you to write? Do you listen to music, things of that nature?
Well, all of my writing is based off of personal experience. It's based off the hurt, the trauma, the grief that most people experience in their lives. And as someone who feels things very deeply, I can relate and be very compassionate and also feel things for other people and relate to them on an emotional level. So I get my inspiration of other people's feelings, emotions, personal experiences, as well as my own. And, I like to think that in my inspiration process that I'm not only giving myself a voice, but I'm giving other people a voice to their personal experiences, things that they've gone through in their life that maybe they don't have the strength to talk about. So that's where I mainly get my inspiration from.
You're very in tune empathetically. We've already talked a couple of times, both before hitting the record button and after, of we get each other. A couple of the things I really focus on in my novels is kind of exploration of the human struggle as well. So definitely appreciate you for doing that. If you could change one thing about your poems, either your process, the length of time it takes to write them, collaborating with someone, whatever it may be, if there is one thing you could change about that, what would it be and why?
I think I definitely change the length of time that it takes to write them.
Here,
Everybody,
here.
it takes you might think that, oh well, it's one page, it takes you quick. It actually takes you forever. And by the time you're done editing that poem to perfection, you just feel like, well, all my creative juices are now, they are bone dry. There is not one drop of creative energy left in me for the day. Like, we'll reconvene 7 days later. Maybe I'll feel inspired then.
I appreciate that. I took 3 months off from my second book while writing it, because one character wouldn't behave. And now it's his book, and I'm about getting ready to take a 1 month break for him to go start my second novel series. And I'm kind of at like, you know what? I think we need a vacation from each other. So I appreciate another author, or in this case, a poet, who definitely is like, I need to fix my process, but sometimes I need a break, okay? And you're doing the
Yeah.
self-publishing poetry around other life jobs too, right? This is not your full-time gig.
Yeah, definitely. I was working as a content writer for a few months full time when I decided that, okay, I'm going to publish. And because of COVID, it was a short term opportunity. So I was only employed for, say, 4 months, but I managed to get unemployment benefits and stuff later on. That it'll only actually come through in the next few months. But anyway, um, shortly after I decided to publish, I my contract ended with that internship. And so I had a lot of time on my hands and I had a lot of, well, I still had my savings, but I had a lot of time on my hands. And in the meantime, I was full time doing surveys, like surveys galore, on this app, Survey Time, Steepies, all the survey apps. I've tried them. I know what works. I know what doesn't. To get money via PayPal, just to keep me going, So yeah, I was doing the formatting, editing, designing. I was doing that part-time at whatever free moments I had besides the surveys. And trust me, surveys actually keep you really busy, especially the ones that pay you nicely. You'll be there for like an hour just answering personal questions. But yeah.
It's not a horrible way to make some income if you need to get in between incomes, though. I did that for a little bit when I was in college. Just as like you said, you gotta try and make the bills somehow for sure. So much appreciating your journey, what you're going through, my pal. What do you think is probably the number one most unique thing about your writing process?
I would say that because I draw from personal experiences and I draw from other people's personal experiences, that my writing process is it's unique to me. I mean, other people might have a different way of writing poetry or a different way of writing, period. But mine's unique to me because it starts off at the brainstorming process. And then that's just it's the little roots. And then you water it, and then it becomes, the stem starts to grow and the flower. And you know, you work with one concept, but you also try to include feeling in it. You know, you try to convey those emotions. It's very different to writing a novel, because yes, in a novel you can create a certain chapter and you have all of these words to describe how you're feeling, or you can use dialogue, or you could use a whole lot of other things. Now with poetry, you just have to use your words, like plain and simple, like to convey like what you are feeling. And you usually have to think about, okay, this means that, this conveys that. So there is quite a bit of thoughts and work that goes into writing a poem.
And I've done a little bit of poetry writing, so I can kind of attest to what you're saying. You don't have the room to go on forever. You've got to kind of, unless you're writing like epic poetry a la Shakespearean style all the way back to Beowulf, you have, like you said, one page, maybe two of these days for a poem, and you just don't have the time for all the extra stuff that us novel writers like throwing in.
Definitely. You have to keep it short, keep it sweet, because a lot of people do not want to be reading a poem that's like 5 pages.
I signed up for a poem, not a short story. I had a student say that to me once when I was teaching Beowulf. I signed up for a poem, not a short story. Sorry, it's not my fault that this is how they used to tell it. By the way, did you know that's the basis for music? What? Where do you think we get lyric writing from, kid? So, as far as for brainstorming, have you ever gotten into, just like you said, I am creative energy writing drained? What do you do to kind of brainstorm or jumpstart yourself back into recreating or even starting from scratch with something?
Well, because I get my inspiration from particularly what I've gone through and what I'm feeling and what other people are feeling, I usually have like an inspiration playlist. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, Otherwise, I just go on Spotify and I look for a grunge kind of depression kind of. I look for songs that will get me in my groove, but sometimes I don't always look. Sometimes I just select a pre-made playlist and I'll find a song and I'll be like, now I feel creative. And that's all it takes. Sometimes it's a movie, sometimes it's a book. You never know where inspiration will strike you, but you always have to be ready to take it up, take it by the horns.
I think that's a really good message for new writers, even if you are a new writer, to say that to a new writer. That's a great message for us to pass around. Just take the inspiration where you can grab it from, for certain. And other than that, what is your advice to us newbie authors and poets? How do we make that inner critic of ours get quiet and actually behave so we can produce things?
I've thought about this. So I would tell newbie authors that, you know what, you just gotta unplug that critic voice. You just gotta say no, man. Like, no. Because 99% of the time, that inner critic is putting doubt in you and it's making you feel like, as a writer, that your work will never measure up. And it keeps so many people from pursuing their dreams because, it's like you're full of fear that you won't succeed as a writer. So my advice is, you gotta shush that voice. You gotta shush that voice. You also have to be logical and also believe in your capabilities, your writing talents. You gotta know what your strengths are so that when that voice comes up and tells you that, well, you'll never be good as so and so, well, you gotta be like, well, that's what makes me unique. I mean, I know that it's just a empty canvas now, but sooner or later, after a couple strokes, it's gonna be art.
The way you're wording, like the way you speak, is even poetic and inspirational. I absolutely love it. So,
Thank you.
as you're quite welcome, my dear. So, as for other authors or groups you've worked with online, as we start to wind down, is there anyone you would like to give a shout out to?
Okay, Jenna. So, I'm pretty new to this writing industry, so I don't know a lot of authors yet, and because I'm not financially there yet to buy my own books or help support other authors financially, I thought that I would just shout out to a lot of groups that have helped me in my own author process. Groups that you can find on Facebook that are super helpful, and a lot of other authors will give you advice on the industry that is so invaluable. It's just things that no one else will tell you, and that they don't want you to learn the hard way. So here's to authors supporting authors, aspiring aspiring writers united, self-publishing support group, and unconventional authors like us. Those are
I think
just a
we're
few.
I think we're both in all four of those groups. I adore them. Oh my
They are
goodness.
amazing. They are amazing. They are so helpful. Those are just the most the most ones that pop up. I don't have time to go into every group, but those
Right.
are the trend that I've noticed that is the most helpful. I mean, there are tons of other author groups, but definitely for authors starting out, those four are your cornerstone.
Oh, yes. And there's so many new authors in there who are both indie and trad and self-published and hybrid. There's veteran authors in there giving tons of advice. And honestly, I assume that's one of those groups is how you found me and the interest formed to do this. But
Yes,
they're
definitely. It was actually how I found you.
wonderful. Perfect. That means my posts are working. Yay, the algorithm gods are letting me win today. But you can ask a question and get 20 answers in less than an hour, and they're all good answers. They're not, some of them are mean, I'll admit, some people are just jerks, but most of them, they're pretty solid answers. And if they don't know the answer, they will tag someone else in the group who will. So if you want to join those groups, definitely, my lovelies, join us over there. Oh my goodness, they're so much fun. And if you're not on Facebook, there are plenty of other author groups on other social media platforms, I assume. So, as far as things go for me, did you have any questions for me, my dear?
One. Okay. So, how has the response been for your first book, Jenna?
My first book did not do nearly as well as my second book. Part of it is because of what you said. I teach full time. I teach public school English certified reading specialist here in the States, and we don't get paid that much, unfortunately. For anyone who wants a clue, I taught in West Virginia when they were striking a couple years ago because the pay was that bad and still is. But I didn't have nearly as much experience because my first book was my first time publishing, period, end of story. It just took forever for me to get momentum built. And thankfully, there was a handful of people who did read book one that were waiting in the wings for book two.
Two. Okay.
To help a little
That's
bit.
exciting.
So I still could be doing a lot better than I am. I will admit that. But it's just learning. I know my next book, book 3, when it comes out this coming spring, it's going to be a little bit better and a little bit better. I see that now. So I hope for any author that just recently published anything, no matter if you're a newbie or a vet, indie or trad, I hope your next book just does better than the one you published previously. You're in competition against yourself, nobody else.
That's super powerful. And you're making me a bit inspired that maybe I should just
Aww.
start that second book.
I literally, my husband and I were talking about this past week. This time last year, I was just finishing writing my first book. Since then, I've written an entire another one, started a third, and I'm starting an entire another series. And he said, "Did you think that you would write this much in a year?" And I said, "No. All it took was what one of my favorite authors, J.R. Ward, says, I just got to put my butt in the chair and do it." You know, we are our own worst critics, kind of like you said. We really are.
It definitely is so true because, like you're saying, it's you against you. And if you don't believe that you can, then you're never gonna do it. Like, you're never gonna actually say, like, for me, for example, I was also one of those people that was just like, oh, from the time I've graduated, I was like, okay, I'll publish. And then COVID happened, and then I kept on having these thoughts like, well, what's stopping you now? You have the time, you have the resources, and you still aren't doing it, Kayla. And then I had to really take a real look at myself and think, okay, well, if it's fear that you're afraid of, you never know until you try. Like if you're afraid of how people are going to take your work and receive your work, you don't know that. You haven't published it. And so
That's very true.
I had to kick myself in the butt to say, well, this is the year. Even if no one reads your book, even if one person reads your book, this is the year that you need to do what you have said you're going to do.
I 100% agree. I'm a part of those group of teachers that we went on spring break and never went back. So I understand. Literally, we were stuck here. They told us, we will see you in 2 weeks to let us clean the school. We'll see you in a month. And I looked at my husband and I said, I'm going to start working on my book. By the end of March, they had said we are closed for the school year, and half of our kids don't even have computers or internet at home. So just give them their current grade from the third 9 weeks as the whole year. And I'm like, well, for the 20 kids that did your work, thank you. I'm not the only teacher who had that happen, to be fair. We gave you a free pass and you took it. You were not stupid. You were very smart. But it did free up that time, like you said, and it just felt
Yeah.
good. And I will admit, I love the process of rolling in from one book to another. Maybe because I write serialized novels, that might be it. But for you, I could see where you would need a break. Poetry takes such a high-end amount of energy that, again, admiring you very much. Much smaller canvas than I have.
It is, but it can also be intricate.
True.
And that's what I found out through my own writing process, because whew, it did not when I first started writing, it did not look anything like it looks now. And even
Agreed.
there's some parts of me that reads over it and it's like, this is not perfect. That's not perfect. And it's just like, Kayla, well, you already published. It's just an extra capital letter here or there. You do not need to be a perfectionist. And that's also probably why it took me so long to publish my book. Because it's like, after what point of editing do you actually say like, okay, well, I'm happy with it now.
That's what I had to do with book 2. And even still, I'm finding errors in it. So definitely agreed and appreciated there. My editor would say, no one would want to read Jenna's book before she got it. No one did. Anyway, so did you have any other questions for me today then, my dear?
No, I'm all good.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you, my lovelies, for joining us. And where can they find you at, my dear? On Instagram and on Facebook?
Yes, they can find me on Instagram at Kaylah Boyce, and they can find me on Facebook at Kaylah Boyce.
And
Recently, in the near future, I'll be creating a page called Violet Poetry, and it'll be linked to my Facebook profile. And I'll be releasing stuff on TikTok. So fingers
you'll
crossed
have
when
to
that
let
does
us know
happen.
how that goes. Oh my goodness. I would love to have you back for season 3 to let us know how your TikTok adventure goes. I've heard a lot of people have been going to TikTok, and I might be doing a panel on authors, artists, and so on that do TikTok. So keep an eye out for that in the future, okay?
Oh my word, fingers crossed. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you again for joining us today, my lovelies. It's been wonderful having you. Take care of yourselves a little bit better each day. You definitely deserve it. Bye, my friends.